Hi, Greg McMillan here. Welcome to the iPhoneography podcast. This episode was recorded on a regular day, but at an earlier time, so there was a few hiccups with the audio. Forgive us for that, but I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Dave is on his way to his desk to join us, but for now, I'll bring Dwight in. Hey, Dwight.
Hey, everybody. How you doing, Greg?
Good. What we're going to do today is, so we're still waiting for Dave to pop on here, but he'll be along here shortly. We are going to talk about taking control of your camera. A lot of people just like to point and shoot, and that's it. But the iPhone camera system it's so powerful in a lot of ways that I think people don't even realize. And so we're going to talk just about a few things here that could help you take control of your camera and help improve your photos. Things like exposure and focus and that sort of thing. So I think we will start with maybe camera selection. And there's Dave. You're still kicking after the big run on the weekend.
Yeah. I just woke up. But
oh, did you?
Yeah. Well, maybe half hour ago, I was watching TV and fell asleep during a show.
Well, that's all right. I mean, you took the day off work too, did you not?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
so, I took today and tomorrow off.
Yeah,
just
well,
because. Oh, no.
Well, it's not a bad idea because, I'm sure your concentration would not be at its peak performance level for work after, a long haul like that.
Well, not only that, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize is how much of your day is just taken up when you do a long event like that. And I didn't get home until 1:00 in the afternoon. So that kind of killed most of the day.
Yeah,
so,
it would.
So trying to do anything else, you're like, oh, I have other stuff I need to do. Oh, I need to take off so I can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, glad that you made it through it without any injury or anything like that. Just tired and recovering now, so that's a good thing.
True.
So I was just saying before you come on that we're going to, talk about taking control of the camera on the phone. And so I think what we'll do is we'll start with camera selection. And how that could help improve your photography, because something that a lot of people don't even realize is that with the iPhone, when you select, say, the telephoto camera, if it's not really bright, then it's going to take the main camera and zoom it, and it's kind of giving you I don't want to say a false impression of what you're viewing. I mean, it still zooms it, but in my opinion, the image quality is not as good. So,
right. And we'll say not a false of what's out there, or a false of what you're going to do when you take a picture, but it is Apple saying, "We know best. Trust us. We're Apple.
Yeah.
We know what you should be doing."
Yeah.
And when you're
just real quick,
no,
Dave,
did
you start your audio recording, Dave?
I did, yeah. I started it just a little bit later. So there'll be just a little bit of me missing, maybe like a first minute or so.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So yeah, I mean, and I find Apple does that a lot with their camera system, is they make it work like, they think they know that the people know what they want. And that goes with, not just, if you just point and shoot, then it's using its machine learning or its intelligence of some sort to focus on what it thinks is the subject. And I gotta say, most of the time is right, but sometimes you may want to put your focus on somewhere else. So then you have to take control, even if it's just tapping on the screen on what you want to focus on. But as far as the camera selection goes, Dwight, you supplied a couple of photos here that I'm gonna dig up, but start talking about why, camera selection could be an important thing.
Sure. You know, for me, photography is all about composition, right? So within our iPhone cameras, we have, the 1X, depending on which model you have, the 1X, I think the latest phones are 1X, 2X, and 5X, which are optical zoom. So the quality of those is good. And you may approach a scene where the 1X camera works better than the 5X. Conversely, the 2X may work better than either one of those. So when I approach a scene, I kind of try to decide what I want the the viewer to see and myself to see. So it really still comes down to composition. For me,
Yeah.
the 5X, the optical zoom is an opportunity, to get closer, obviously, to something, but to get maybe a little bit more creative in the shot where, you may have a foreground element that's blurred or, some type of bokeh. I think it makes it more interesting, but, um, yeah, the 1X is kind of a natural field of view as if we're looking at the scene ourselves. And, in my example that I have here, I'll have a 5X, which kind of brings you into the scene a little bit more. So this is 1X. So this looks like I am standing at the top of the staircase here, looking down on Woods Cove in Laguna Beach. It gave me an opportunity to see more of the scene. It gave me the opportunity to use the railings of the staircase as leading lines into my scene. And you can kind of see from a distance the what you will see later, zoomed in with the 5X. But you see more of the beach, you see more of the contour of the beach, you see more of the sky, more of the contrast in the clouds, more of the color in the water. So, for this particular perspective, this is good for me. I was able to take a vertical shot here, and I was able to see, more in the scene. And this was a manual raw photo.
And the other thing about using the 1X or the main camera, or now they call it the Fusion camera, is if as long as you're not shooting just Bay or RAW, but if you shoot hike or JPEG or Pro RAW, you can actually get the full 48 megapixels out of the camera, which is gives you a lot of detail and whatnot. And if you do decide you want to crop a little bit, if as long as you're at that full resolution, you're going to have a lot to work with. Whereas with a Bayer RAW, it's only 12 megapixel, and I mean, you got me hooked on it, Dwight. I mean, the quality is still like really, really, really good come from an iPhone.
Yeah, I don't think there's any comparison really for me. And Todd in the chat mentioned that he follows Alex Armitage, who I really get a kick out of on
he's
YouTube.
Good. He's good.
And, I do use a dedicated third-party app. I usually use Reflex, Pro Camera, or Halide. I know Halide's coming out with Mark III soon, so it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. But yeah, I think it's always good to be able to shoot with a third party lens, and I think we'll get into that a little bit more later, right, Greg? But I think Todd's point is to get yourself familiar with a shooting app other than the standard camera app.
Yeah. So now you've zoomed in with your 5X, is that right, with this next picture?
Yeah, so this is relatively the same scene. I did move over to the left a little bit, and when I framed it up, I noticed that I had a foreground element, a midground element, and a background element, which is what I try to do for all my landscape shots. Otherwise, for me, a landscape shot is just in my experience, is just boring. I think you need to have all three elements to make it interesting for depth. But anyway, so as I mentioned earlier, we had some plants here, that provides depth now. So, those are out of focus. That's my foreground. My midground is in focus. and then my background is it kind of falls off from that. But my whole goal here was to see a little bit more detail in the rocks. We're not seeing the color in the water as much because we're not pulled back. This is more about, being creative and getting those three elements in the shot, along with some detail in the rocks, which is what I was able to pull out in post editing, because I shot in RAW.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great example. And the nice thing about the 5X as well is the compression that you get in the scene, right? It compresses everything together. Like um, it shows it in layers, but even though, like, okay, say the rock up in the background there in the
Yep.
upper left, it's a fair distance away, but the compression brings that in, and it just brings everything together. Whereas if I go back to the wide angle,
Mm-hmm.
it really looks far away,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, there's so many different like little nuances of these lenses, of these cameras, right within the iPhone that, and had you used the ultra wide, it would have looked like way, like miles away.
Yeah, I think
Because
I
it's
looked
even
at
a
the
wider
ultra
view.
wide on this one, and it was too much. It was almost
Yeah.
fisheye looking, kind of. It didn't for me. It didn't work for the
Well,
scene.
yeah, not for the scene. There's
Yeah.
definitely a place for the ultra wide.
Sure.
But I agree. I don't think this would be it. Unless you've got more stuff in the foreground and more more dramatic sky to show, but then you're losing everything in the middle, right? You're everything.
That's right.
It's going to look too far away, and you're
That's
not
right.
going to.
And the more I shoot in RAW, the more I am moving away from the standard, Apple camera app. I'm looking at these influencers and stuff on Instagram, and I can tell what is shot now by an iPhone. It is so obvious for me now.
Yeah.
That white
You can.
glow and the contrast,
Yeah.
but it still works
Um,
for a lot of people. So
yeah.
I mean,
So
sorry, Greg.
yeah, go ahead, Dave. I
Well,
was
I say
going
this
to
is
go to you,
something-
Dave, but
Okay, but
Go.
that's something that we talked about in the past, where Apple does do the, you want to call it 80-80 rule, 90-90 rule. 90% of the time, for 90% of the people, their default, their base is good enough. That's all you really need. We are the outliers. We're not the 90-90 for the most part. We're pushing the boundary of what this device can do. So Apple, and it's more of a financial, if you will, because they know that if they put as a default a camera that can do all this stuff, people are going to look at it and think, I just want to take a photo. If you're not at the advanced level where you want to take RAW, or, if you're just wanting to take a photo, which most people just want to take a photo, you may get overwhelmed with all this. Now, I don't know if we all agree, I think that Apple should have, just like they have an advanced calculator, but the default is the simple, they should have the same thing with the camera. Just give me an advanced mode. But
Yeah.
where you could say, select this lens instead of it doing its magic behind the scenes. But I think their problem is they're afraid that if they do that, people go to the advanced setting, think the camera's messing up. All of a sudden, all you hear is an iPhone can't take good pictures anymore. What's wrong with the iPhone camera? When it's like, yeah, you're using an advanced feature. It's kind of like if you were trying to use a very expensive DSLR with manual mode and you have no idea what you're doing, and the photos turn out bad. Guess what? That's your fault.
yeah, exactly.
But also
Yeah.
with the difference between the 1 and the 5, that is more true for portraits and taking pictures of of people. Not necessarily portrait mode, but just if a person, or if a single person is your focus. If you take, let's say, I think we did this years ago, maybe it was the Tiny Shutter podcast, where you try to take a photo with the different lenses, and you try to, walk closer and further away so you can get the size of the person the same. The face looks completely different between being like having depth to the face versus being pushed in. And that's why a lot of times the selfie camera, the front-facing camera, looks completely different because they're that close. Aw, and they're trying to make up for that. And I mean, that is
Yeah.
something where, like I said, you're trying to take a picture of someone, and like Dwight was saying about the difference between the 1, the 5, and the 3 that we used to have, and who knows what's going to happen in the future, that it could make a big difference.
Yeah.
And it's something to think about. And really, with Apple, a lot, like you said, a lot of times if the lighting is not great, if you're even, I wouldn't even say it's bad lighting, it's average lighting indoors. It'll say, oh, this will make it grainy and too dark, and we'll have to artificially boost it. We're going to give you the Fusion camera. We're going to give you the main camera. Now, one thing is, and I don't think I missed talking about this, but if you're in your if you're in your Photos app, if you just kind of push up, it'll tell you what lens it what lens it used. So if you go into there, just because if you don't know what's being used, you may not know if you because there's a couple of shots I took over the weekend which were pretty zoomed in, but apparently it wasn't zoomed enough to use the 5x lens, and it's like, this is Fusion camera. Okay, this was pretty zoomed in, but apparently I was in between.
Yeah, it's
the
like
2 and the 5.
4.99. We'll be using that Fusion camera.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so Dave, while we're on the topic of swiping up, just real quick, tell people how they can access some of the advanced features of the Apple Camera app.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways to do it, really, and I'm going to describe this for people who are only listening, but I'll try to show my phone here. And what I'll do is, we're going to have a picture-in-picture kind of going on here. So there's 2 ways to actually access these. One, there is a little, if you want to call it a caret or a triangle in the very top. And if you click that, it'll bring up a whole bunch of extra features down below. And my problem with the other way is it doesn't always work for me. If you swipe up, just because if I'm trying to do this while I'm, let's say, outside, or if I'm doing something and my hands aren't 100% clean, it has issues. But that's more of a me thing. But doing that gives you all the additional options down here. So for the most part, if you're just taking a regular photo, they're all hidden. So you don't have to worry about it. The only thing down there is the selecting the different lenses here. Depending on what phone you have, the 0.5, the 1x, and depending on what mode you're in. If you're on the high 48, you can actually select between the basically the 1.2, 1.5, and it just crops it in the sensor. So it's not really, it's a crop, but it's not a digital crop. It's on the pixels, so it should be a little bit better. The 2x, which is not a lens, it's just, again, cropping what's available there. And the 5, which, of course, is you're zoomed in. You can see every pore in your face if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
But
it's the telephoto, and it uses that other camera,
Mm-hmm.
If it's bright enough, as long as it's bright enough.
Exactly. But if you swipe up, you can actually select, some of the basic things like flash on, flash off, which is also available on the upper right. So a lot of those are on the very top and at the very bottom. Night mode, where you can actually, if it goes into night mode, you can force it to do different levels. So by default, it does, I think, on a normal night, it does 3 seconds. If you're in a full moon, it may take it down to 1 second. But you can push it over. Doesn't go all the way to 30 seconds, but it goes to 10 seconds. It will actually it will go to 10 seconds if you're doing it handheld. If you're on a tripod or lean it against the wall or something else, it will go to a 30-second exposure. It'll say 30 seconds. It'll take 30 seconds to take it, but it will be a stacked version, if you will.
Yeah, it's 3 10-second exposures in the latest phones. And this is folks, this is taking control of your camera right here. Like, you're sure the phone will do night mode and it'll do it all by itself, but you can actually control what it can do. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So just touch on maybe just a couple more of them real quick before we
one
move on
that
to
I
something.
use now, admittedly, I do not use the photographic styles before I take the photo. Mainly because I want to take the time and try different ones. I don't want to do it beforehand. Now, if you do have one that you prefer, you can select it. It's also down there. The other one I use a lot is where you can automatically select the aspect ratio. So 4:3 is your normal. You can do it where it will take the photo in square. If you're a fan of live photos like I am, if you do it in square, you cannot do live for whatever reason. I don't understand. Or 16:9, which is what I kind of have it set at. Now, if you do take a 16:9 photo, it is taking a 4:3 photo. It's just cropping it on screen before you take it. So, and it's still a live photo. So if you take a 16:9, so it zooms in a little bit, you get a little extra zoom because of the way it's cropping it. So if you take a 16:9 photo in the built-in app, you can crop it afterwards and expand it out because you'll have a little bit above and a little bit below, which is also a nice little thing. And also down there you have the timer and an exposure. So you can you have an exposure slider down here that you can make it, or you can do, there we go, or the self-time, or the timer. Turn it off, and 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Also, on the upper part, real quick, because I have the live on, so the little circle on the upper right is on. If you want to turn it off, you can just type that, tap it, and it gets a line through it. And then I have it set to HEIF normal, if you will, HEIF 48. But if you click up there, here, let me do that again. Let me get back here. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So if you click up here, I'm trying to do it while looking. Oh, okay. There we go. Hold on. Okay. Click and hold. I'm sorry. Click and hold. You can select. I'm going to try to get this so it can be seen on screen here. Unfortunately, you have the HEIF Max, RAW 12, or RAW Max. So if you want to do, now this is of course Pro RAW, but if you want to do a quick switch between non-Pro RAW and, either saving it in RAW or HEIF, or just do a quote unquote normal 48 megapixel, you can do a quick switch up there. So that's the thing I used this past weekend, where it was a shot that was a little extra distance, and it was kind of a challenging shot. And I wanted to do it in HEIF Max instead of what I normally have in. So I just held that, gave me the option, made the change, and then I was able to take a picture pretty quickly without having to dive into a lot of settings and make changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's they make these things fairly accessible, and I've seen different times where people don't realize that if they tap that little arrow, that menu comes up and you have all these options. So, if you haven't explored them, give it a shot. See what they're all about. I believe we talked about all those different options, I think, when we were doing the Picture Perfect series, if I remember correctly. So look through the archives of the show and on the audio side anyway, because I don't think we're doing video at the time, and see if we, I think it's the camera features, I think it was, the episode. It was basically about that.
And something that we've said multiple times, there's no cost to take a photo. So if you want to take a photo and just use, I'm going to do it just built in that way. It's kind of my security. I can just take a photo, give it what it gets me, and I'm happy with it. But if you also want to say, now I want to try to experiment and, do a manual exposure, change these different things, different formats, do it. I mean, unless you have a quickly moving or a very quick around subject that you're trying to take a photo of, take the time, take the multiple ones, and that way you can see, oh, I'm experimenting here and I have this here and I have this here. No, this isn't going to work. Or, oh, I tried this and this didn't work out, but I kind of like the way this looked. So give it a try as much as possible and experiment.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Uh, I mean, that's the best way to learn how to do all this stuff. And like you say, taking the picture's free. It's not going to cost you anything. And if if you're taking a picture of something important, don't play around. Do what you know is going to work. But if you're experimenting, and you want to see how some of these things work and what they do, go ahead and give them a shot. So something that I do a lot of when I take control of my camera is controlling the exposure. And I use reflex most of the time. And there's a feature in reflex called zebra stripes. And when you turn that on or when you activate it, if you're any dark areas of the frame that are underexposed, they will have these lines going at an angle, and they'll be blue. And if you're overexposed, there'll be these lines on an angle and they're red. If you're blowing out the highlights. So I have a couple of pictures here that I know that I manually exposed. And this first one is, if I can just get it on screen here. There we go. So this was just last night. I went out to a beach, and I'll tell more about that story when I get to our recent photos. But I used those zebra stripes in this image to make sure that I wasn't blowing out the highlight. So obviously, where the sun is, that's going to be the brightest part of the image. And then, of course, there's a little bit of the cloud right above it is pretty bright, and maybe down into the water where it's reflecting is really bright. Now, the sun is right on the horizon, and it's getting ready to go down below the horizon. When I exposed this, I put my my ISO as low as it could go, and I'm on a tripod, of course, so I should say that much. So I would drag my ISO down as low as it can go, and then because I didn't want any signal gain in the image, and I just wanted it as good as I can get it. And then I would adjust the shutter speed, and I would, if the highlights were blown out when I first started, I would see these red stripes in the sun. So I would take my shutter speed and I would actually take it to a higher number, like 1/200, 200, 1/300. These are just examples. 1/400. So what that actually is doing is it's creating a faster shutter speed where it won't give it time to overexpose. So by doing that, though, the shadow areas got very, very dark, and it got to the point where some of them were showing those blue zebra stripes. And my dog's going nuts here. Hang on a second.
Yeah, Greg, I think that's as your dog's doing its thing. I think that's the challenge in manual photography, right? If you expose for the highlights, keeping the sun from being blown out, which you should, then that presents a challenge in the shadows, which to me, having a little bit of blue in the shadows is fine. But if you isolated the foreground from the sky and you got the sun out of your adjustments, I bet you can bring some of those shadows back. Now, in this case, I'm not sure that that's worth it because I like the photo the way it is, but I think that some of that may be able to come back by the way that you exposed it, just to where you got rid of the indicators of being blown out on the sun.
Yeah, and I shot this with re-expose, so that's the long exposure RAW app from the folks at Reflex. And so what it's doing is it's frame averaging, but it's still giving you a RAW file to work with. And with this one here, the stuff at the bottom of the frame, it was totally black, totally dark. There was no detail in it at all when I took the shot. But like you say, the nice thing about like my old Canon camera, I never would have been able to do this. It just didn't have that latitude. But with the phones these days, and even the more modern DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, I think they just do a lot better job at getting the details back out of the shadows. Because I took this into, I believe it was Luminar Neo. Oh, actually, you know what? I did this one on the phone in Luminar Mobile. So I didn't have as many tools to play with, but it still worked. I could have brought more detail out of the shadows, but I didn't want to have them override the sun itself and then the sky and how it gradients up into a blue with the clouds and that. I wanted I wanted the top part of the frame to be the star of the show type of thing, whereas I could have brought a lot more detail into the bottom. In fact, when I did bring up the detail, so this on the right-hand side of the frame, as it goes out into the water, that's a wharf. And there's all these pieces of timber and all that stuff from years gone by. And they were actually coming up a little on the blue side. And I didn't like that. So what I did was I took it into Photomator, because you can't do this in Luminar Mobile. But I took it into Photomator and I put a little linear gradient on the bottom and just took the brightness back down to hide some of those details and make it look not so blue. But the point of this whole thing is when you do a shot like this of a sunset, or, where there's something very bright, even though there's something dark, you can't blow out the highlights, because you will not get them back. You can smash the shadows, but you can get those back. It's weird how that works in these sensors these days, but it's how it works. And, so I recommend to anybody, if they're going to use manual exposure for something like this, get it so that the blowout in the highlight just disappears. So what I did was I adjusted the shutter speed so that those little red zebra stripes just disappeared, and I took the shot. And I think this was probably maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever. So when I opened the image in Luminar, it was really dark looking, but I was able to get all that stuff back, and it just works really well. So that is taking control of the exposure of the camera. Can you do that in the Apple camera? Yes, but you don't have any indicators to help you with it. You have to either use, like Dave talked about it, pop up the extra features and use the exposure value slider, or you can tap on the screen and drag your finger down to bring down the exposure, and you just kind of have to eyeball it so that you're not blowing out the highlights. And as long as you're shooting Pro RAW in the Apple camera, you could probably get those details back in the shadows. If you're shooting JPEG or HEIF, probably not. Once they're gone, they're gone. But that the whole idea is to take control of it. Use probably the best format would be RAW or Pro RAW, and then you can get those things back. But don't blow out the highlights. The other image I wanted to show real quick is
Greg. Before you move on,
yep.
To kind of give an analogy of why you can't get the highlights back, is think about each bit of light hitting a pixel and filling it up. So the brighter it is, the more it's filled up. And even though, especially in RAW, they may look black to you, there's still a little, like one or two little dips that is in that bucket. And you can get those back by adjusting it like you did. That's everything. If you're doing a manual exposure, a lot of times it's going to take a little bit more time to do work after the fact. And you'll just have to go in acknowledging that. You're not going to say, I might take a photo and then it's going to take me 2 seconds and it's great. It's going to take some time. And that's something you have to realize. But also, if you overexpose it, so you fill up that bucket's full. And it's kind of like, well, once it's full, it's glued in there. So it doesn't matter if you try to take it down. You're like, oh, I want to get rid of. No, you can't do that. you're overblown.
Yeah.
That is gone. So you can't make any
that's right.
adjustments that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
true.
Greg, another option, alongside with the zebras, if you want, is the histogram. You can watch both sides of that, the shadows being on the left and the lights being on the right. And if you see it climbing up either side, you've on the left side, you've blown out the shadows, or
Yeah.
you're too high in your highlights. So I like to use them both in conjunction with each other
Yeah.
if I can.
Yeah. And, you can very, very little. You could only do it a little wee bit, but you can actually blow out the highlights in the shot and get them back if you shoot like bare raw, or you probably work with pro raw as well. But you don't want to push it, because if you go too far, then you get to the point where you can't get them back. I would say, if you're adjusting the exposure, and if you got just a little bit up on the right hand side of the histogram, or if you have just a few little zebra stripes showing, you could get that back in editing. But again, if you go just a little bit too far, then that's when you'll lose them. And you can almost tell by looking at a picture that you've lost the highlights. If you've tried to get them back, you could pretty well tell if the bright part of the image isn't changing when you adjust the sliders, then you've lost it, because it's not doing anything. Like Dave says, it's glued in there. So something to remember. And so you've got two options there, really. You got the zebra stripes and you got the histogram. And unfortunately, the Apple Camera app doesn't have these things in. And like you said earlier, Dave, give us a pro mode, or give us an advanced mode where you can have some of these things. You turn them on if you want, turn them off if you don't. I think it would be a great thing. But I just can't see Apple doing it, because, we're the fringe cases.
They could at least give us a switch like they used to have to turn off the deep fusion processing. They used to have that.
And the HDR, yeah, for sure.
And masking in post, if they, if they're not going to bring Photomator in, at least get some masking in this case, to isolate the sky from the foreground, to try to bring some of that shadow back in, if you wanted that. And I think, the way you have it right here works fine for this scene, but.
Yeah. So this scene here, this was a trip to a big city. I took my brother to a hospital for an appointment, and I had about an hour to just, run around and try to get pictures of stuff. Never been there before, so I thought it was an interesting, time. But this one here, the sky, it was like kind of a hot, hazy day. So the sky wasn't, it was sunny and everything else, but there was so much haze in the air that the sky didn't even look blue. And if I tried to, I really had to watch my exposure on this. So, I had to be careful not to overexpose the sky. It wasn't that hard to keep it in check. But it's just another example of what could go wrong if I had, either just let the phone do its own thing, or if I dialed the exposure up just a little too much. Now the original, this is an edited version, obviously, and the original, I'm trying to think. I think I might have had to tone down the sky a little bit to make it not so bright. But this is just another example of controlling the exposure, taking control of it, so that it doesn't go array on you. Like it doesn't look all messed up. But so I think next what we'll talk about is like focusing. So Dave, in the Apple Camera app, the best way to focus is
hit the screen. So
there you go.
Pretty much that's it. I mean, that's the only thing they have. If you have the button on the side, I think there's a way you can do it, but honestly, poking the screen's the best way. So if you see something that let's say you want to focus on something that's not, because Apple, as we know, tries to do as much as they can to handle as many people as possible, will give you a decently focused all the way across the board. But let's say you want to focus on something close up on the bottom right of the photo. Apple won't do that automatically. So you can hit and tap the screen down there to have it focused on there, or if you tap the screen and hold it, it will put a focus lock.
Mhm.
So you'll be able to move it a little bit more. However, I've noticed that if you do that, after just a little bit of time, that focus lock goes away.
Mhm.
So, it doesn't stay until like there's the third party apps where you can hit it, put the focus there, and it'll stay there until you manually say, okay, I want to focus on something else, or you change modes or something else. It will say, oh, you must be done by that. We're just going to give you the old focus and we're going to figure out what to focus on best. You're like, thanks, Apple. Uh,
Yeah.
which if you're trying to one of the things that iPhones are horrible at are moonshots. So one way around that, and this is from Shane Austin, is do a video and move, focus directly on the moon. Zoom as much as you can, focus on the moon, and bring down your brightness. And if you're trying to do that, so you're holding it, it's at night, when you're zoomed in, you shake a little bit, it shakes a lot. And you try to get that focus and you try to get you can try to get the exposure down and you think you got it. And then all of a sudden it goes, oh, okay, you're done. And
Yeah.
Gary, yeah, I know if you hold it for a few seconds, it locks, but it's, as I said, it's not a permanent lock. It's a lock for just a few seconds before Apple decides, oh, you're done apparently, or it isn't working, or, especially if you're trying to do an edge case and it's like, okay, we're just going to give you your focus back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I learned also on the Apple phone while you're trying to focus is, as Dave said, you tap to focus, and then you push the lock by holding it. If you don't lock your phone when you're focusing on something and there's people moving in the background, the iPhone is going to lose the focus and try to focus on everything. So it's really important that if you're trying to take a picture, let's say of your kid or your spouse in the foreground, and you focus on that person, as soon as somebody comes into the frame, it loses it and tries to focus on everything. So that's why the focus lock is important.
Yeah. So talk a little bit then, Dwight, about how you utilize focusing like in third-party apps.
Yeah. So what's really neat about the third-party apps is you have focus indicators. So you have manual focus capabilities. So just like you're looking through a binocular, you can adjust the dial to really try to focus in on your subject is. And some applications have what's called a loop focus or a zoom focus that really pull in like a little square to where you can really see what you're trying to focus on. But in the instance of say reflex, there's a focus peaking, which as you focus, the screen will light up and show you in a color usually of your choice. Let's just say green. As you're manually focusing, you can see whatever turns green is what is in focus. So if I'm taking a raw shot with a third party app for, let's say, a macro shot, I want to make sure that when I adjust my focus that my intended target is lit up with the focus peaking, so I'm getting that exact spot in, because if I don't do that, it's probably focusing somewhere else. So if you have maybe a flower, and I'll show that a little bit later in our recent photos. If you focus on the flower, then everything else is blurry, which to me puts the attention on the flower. So there's importance to focusing properly. I think it comes down to composition again, but at least you have more options. I think in a third party app, um, it's definitely you need it for macro photography and being able to show depth within your photos depending on your artistic approach to how you want to present it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, I find focus peaking to be invaluable when it comes to, say, doing like macro work. Um, it it could be a lifesaver because you have such a small depth of field to work with, and there's times when I've crouched down to get a macro of a flower, and bang, I got the shot right away. Or it may take maybe a second or third try, but I know with uh, without the focus peaking, you could be 15, 20 shots trying to get focus just right where you want it. So, it's definitely an asset. And Maurice says the same thing. Focus peaking is so needed for macro, and love when the app allows for different colors, not just green. Yeah, I'm not sure if Reflex offers more than one color, but I'm pretty sure Pro Camera offers different
Yeah,
colors like
red
blue
and
and
yellow, I think, is another option with them.
yeah, yeah. So but but you can still
Reflex has red and blue, as well as
okay.
green. If you want to pick it, yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and Maurice says Halide doesn't offer that. Yeah, they've got green focus peaking, but that's it. Um, what was I going to say here? Um, oh yeah, focus peaking will work in autofocus. It doesn't have to be in manual focus. But
Right.
so if if you have it activated, and if when the so with I don't know about other apps. I know more about Reflex than I know about any of the other ones. So when Reflex uses the autofocus, it's basically using the same autofocus that you would get out of the Apple camera app. So it's intelligently selecting what it thinks would be the subject. But again, if you could override that obviously with manual focus. And so when you're in autofocus and you got focus peaking turned on, if you see that it's got the right thing in focus right away, bang, you're done. But chances are, if you have focus peaking turned on, it's on because you have something in mind that you want to have in focus, and you may very well have to um, adjust your focus manually. So what I'll do, and this is something that I did with one of my recent photos, I had focus peaking turned on. I used manual focus, and I just set it to a value, and then it was a macro shot. And then when I just move in and out, and you can see the focus peaking changing to what's in focus. And when it was on what I wanted in focus, bang, I hit the shutter. And as long as I don't shake the phone too much, I mean, it works really well. So, um, that's a great way to take control of your camera is using the focus peaking or manual focus. Um, what else is a good way to take manual control of your camera? We've talked about exposure. We've talked about focusing.
White balance.
Okay, so white balance. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead and touch on that one.
Yeah, so every photo that we take it has a white balance. So it's either with our iPhones, if you have the processing on, it usually does a pretty good job of nailing the white balance. But sometimes when you shoot in RAW and you get into post processing, you remember the scene being a little bit cooler, perhaps, than what is reflected on the raw photo. So you may want to dial down the temperature a little bit in post. But as uh, as it pertains to this, some third party cameras like Pro Camera, and I think Reflex does as well. I think you can set your white balance a little bit prior
Mm-hmm.
to taking the shot. So if it's a real warm scene and you want to cool it down, or if it's a cloudy day and it's not rendering properly, you can make it either more blue or you can make it more yellow um, at the time of shooting the photo. Or again, you can do it in post processing with most editing softwares.
Yeah, and this works with RAW as well as JPEG. You can set your white balance. Um, Once it's set though, in with the JPEG, you can't change it afterwards. You can adjust the color tone of the image. You can warm it up, or you can cool it down a little bit, but it's not as effective as it would be with a raw file or a pro raw file. Um, and one thing about Halide is it has 5 or 6 presets. It has daylight, it has fluorescent, the usual suspects that you would find in a my old DSLR had those presets. It didn't have the Kelvin scale. The Kelvin scale, it can go from whatever the low range is to the high range is, and everything in between. And for a lot more precise control over the color temperature or the white balance of the frame of the image. I used it last night when I was doing the sunset that I was shooting. So when I just left the white balance on auto, it was much, much cooler than the scene actually was. And it didn't kick into my head until later to adjust that. I mean, I can adjust them again, in post, but to get the shot, right in the camera, for the last 3 or 4 photos I took, I did adjust the white balance. And the nice thing about doing it right then and there is you can kind of look at the scene and look at your phone, and you can kind of get it to where it looks exactly the same. And then you can take the shot. And then you probably won't need to adjust it in post, but it's definitely a great tool to take advantage of when you're taking manual control of your phone or of your camera. I think something that you touched on, Dave, is file selection, the type of file that you shoot.
Right.
Some third-party apps offer TIFF, as well as JPEG, hike, and RAW and ProRAW and all that stuff. That's basically, that is kind of taking manual control over your camera, because by default it's probably JPEG or hike. And you're the live photo guy, which is a HEIF file or a HEIF file. But that file format does have some advantages over JPEG, right?
Yeah, well, I think the main is the size. Is that HEIF is real good with compression without losing a lot of detail. So we all know we're taking photos and photos and photos and photos, and storage on the phone, you're limited. And for most people, you don't want to pay extra for online storage. If you can get away with the Apple, or even the base step up for Apple, you're making enough money, you can make these things a little bit bigger, maybe. The 99 cents a month for a decent amount of storage, and that's good enough for a lot of people, or the Google Photos or something on that nature. But the HEIF makes a big difference because it makes your photos so much smaller without really losing a lot of the quality compared to JPEG. Now, admittedly, when you're talking about RAW, the different, RAW, Pro RAW, the different types, they're much bigger. But as you guys have said multiple times, you can make a lot more adjustments after the fact, where if you select JPEG or HEIF, you know that there's a lot kind of locked in the minute you take that photo. You can do, you can still do a good amount of editing, but there's a limit. And this is something for certain apps. When you don't have it in RAW, you're really limited on how much you can edit. You can still do editing, but you can't bring out, let's say, like the photo you took. Like if you did that in a JPEG or HEIF, it would be like, oh yeah, those areas down there, they're lost.
Yeah.
That is not there anymore, just because of the compression and saving space. Again, that's good for a majority of the shots you're looking for, but it's the edge cases that's a lot what we're talking about, these edge cases. Or if you want someone who likes to push the boundaries of what a phone can do with taking photos, you need that extra information that's in the RAW file, but you're going to pay for it with storage space.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest advantages of shooting hike in the Apple camera app is the fact that you can, and whether it's a live photo or not, you can play around with the photographic styles. after the fact. Whereas with a JPEG, you can't do that. It won't. It doesn't. The JPEG file doesn't have that much information in it. And the other thing is, if you shoot in hike, you can have, like I know it works in the 15 and the 16 Pro phones. I'm not sure about the 14 Pro, but if you have it set to do so, you can have it so that it remembers, or it keeps the portrait information in the file. So you can take a picture of somebody or a dog or whatever, and it could hold that portrait information. You can turn it into a portrait mode photo because it retains that information. Again, you can't do that with, you can't do it with, I don't know, you might be able to do it with ProRAW, but you can't do it with a Bayer RAW, and you can't do it with JPEG. So that's one of the advantages of shooting in the hike format. Hike or HEIF, I mean, one stands for high efficiency image file, and the other one stands for high efficiency image container. So I never know which way to say it when it comes time to use it in a sentence.
And the thing is, it's not unlike JPEG, where it used to be not just JPG, JPEG, the old abbreviation. That is something you could actually say. The letter J and Peg. Oh, JPEG. Yes. Or GIF or GIF. Well, no, we won't get into that. But GIF. You could say, okay, that makes sense. But HEIF or HEIC, it's like, that doesn't really work well in English.
Yeah.
So
okay, so
we do best we can with the pronunciation, but and like you said, it is nice that and now it does, like I said, the built-in app does see if it's a person or an animal, but it won't do other items automatically. So if you're taking a photo of something and you want that, and it's not an animal or a person, but you still want to be a portrait mode, you have to do that manually.
Yeah.
Now, if it is a person and you have one of the two, it's only the 15 and 16. It will say, I don't know why they couldn't do it earlier. They should have been able to do it earlier. It will say, oh, that's obviously a person. We're going to get all the data as we would for portrait mode, and you can adjust that after the fact, which is great and wonderful. Also, like I said, since I do a lot of live photos, you can do that in live photos where a regular portrait mode loses the ability to do live photos.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, there's pluses and minuses for a lot of this stuff. So I think we'll cut this discussion off there. I think there's probably a lot more that we can include in this conversation, but I think maybe some of it could be their own episodes. Certain things and whatnot. I mean, so even the things we talked about tonight, we could have probably done separate episodes for each one, because there's a lot of different scenarios and a lot of things to cover with these things. But just before we do finish it off, I'll ask each one of you, what would be your number one tip for taking control of your camera? Dwight, let's start with you.
This is an interesting one for me because I'm new to photography, and the thought of shooting manual for me was just overwhelming. So I watched a lot of Dave Addison's videos in the past, and the first thing that he said that stuck with me is always start out with the lowest ISO possible. So I think that's probably the most valuable thing that I do first with my photos is I take that all the way down and then build the shutter speed up from there, and then see if I can, and then the rest kind of falls into place. But I had a mental block for a long time on manual photography. It is starting to get a little bit more clear to me now. I'm definitely not a manual photographer, expert, exposure triangle and all that stuff. But we don't have to worry about that, I think, on the iPhone because we have a fixed aperture. So, which may change in the next phone, a rumor, we'll see. But I think, controlling the ISO and, balancing the light properly in the scene.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. How about you, Dave?
Get to know the app you're using and see what is available. So if you're starting on the default app, know that you do have additional options available and explore them. And I would say explore them when you have a chance to mess up, because you try something new, it's going to turn out bad the first few times. That's life. You have to be bad in order to be good. And there's nothing wrong with being bad, especially if you use it as a growth way. So get to know that before you actually need to use those additional features. And
Yeah.
that to me, just being comfortable where you're not like, oh my goodness, this is a great shot. Oh, how do I want to do, I forget how to do. You want to be and build up slowly. Don't go like, okay, I've or you download a new app, you download Howlide, you use another app, like Reflex. You say, okay, I have all these abilities now that I didn't have before. I'm gonna try everything. You're gonna overwhelm yourself. You won't know what exactly is causing the look that you're getting. So take the time, focus on one bit, get comfortable, familiar with it, and then move off of that.
Yeah, because it's better to be good at one thing than be so at a bunch of them, right? And so I think part of the process of learning this stuff is, like Dwight says with the ISO, kind of get to play with that and kind of get familiar with that, and then explore maybe other things. So, for myself, I think you guys kind of both took what I had in mind because, okay,
Let's say that's what you get for going last.
yeah, right. I think I'll kind of echo what I said before about the zebra stripes. It's a great tool for making sure that you're not overexposed. You can underexpose more than you can overexpose because, like you said, Dave, once it's there, glued in. But if you, and I think to go along with that, I would say try shooting RAW or Pro RAW. You could still develop, you could still edit either a bare RAW or a Pro RAW image in the Photos app. You don't have to go to Lightroom Mobile or something a little more intimidating like that. If you've never played around with these kinds of files before, try them out and try editing them in the Photos app, right in the editing suite. You can do them in there and kind of get to know, the different ways to edit them and whatnot. But just take control of your exposure. But, with the ways that we've been talking about, controlling the ISO and using things like the histogram and zebra stripes. Of course, you need a third-party camera app to do those because the Apple camera doesn't have them. But yeah, definitely play around with it and like you said, Dave, explore, see what these things are capable of. So
yeah, I would say definitely. Excuse me. I would say definitely do that, and YouTube is always your friend as well. So if you have specific questions relative to white balance on a specific camera app or, within whatever app you're working on, just type that into YouTube. There's probably, 10 or 20 videos on that alone. So I'm in YouTube a lot. I've learned a lot there.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's good just to dive in. You can't mess up your phone. So by taking pictures.
Yeah. Okay, so our recent photos. This is where we show them live on YouTube, but obviously, if you've been listening this far along into this episode, you've seen that you can see pictures on your phone screen. So don't forget to have a look at them. And before you get there, Dave, I'm going to say don't do it in CarPlay. There you go. Yeah, because CarPlay will show them, but pay attention to the road, please. So we are going to go through them, and I've got them queued up. I will share my screen, and Dave, I think I've got yours set here to go first.
I'll mute myself here.
Now I just got to get it on the screen. There it is.
There we go. Okay. So I will say these both of these photos were taken during my race yesterday. This was taken before the start line. So we were all kind of waiting to start. And I just love, this was just the only bit of the day we actually had a little bit of clearing. Every other bit of the day was completely overcast, which was a good thing, by the way. we did not want the sun yesterday. But just looking up and the different ages of the buildings, if you will, these are all modern-ish buildings in the last 40 years or so. So there's no old buildings. But I just like a little bit of you have the canyon effect almost, or you're kind of looking up and surrounded by the skyscrapers. And the fact that the building on the right is reflecting the building behind me, and pretty clearly too.
Mhm.
You know, it's got a clean reflection, and actually the building in the middle, uh, because it's kind of I think an octagon shape. If I think it's or six, it's either 8 or 6 sided. You can see kind of a building behind it also getting reflected. So you
Yeah.
have the different reflections going on here, and like I said, you also have the building on the far left was done, I think, in the 80s. The building on the right was done maybe 10 years ago. The one the reflections on, the one with the reflection was done in the, like, mid-80s. The building kinda straight ahead where the little PNC logos on top, I think that was done in the late '70s, early '80s. And the one that says K&L, that's definitely a '70s skyscraper. So it's kinda, you get a feel for different thoughts and different setups on what people thought skyscrapers would look like over a few years.
Yeah, I think this one I think this one's all about the reflections, right?
Mhm.
And, I would not know, uh, time frames of when these were built,
Sure.
specific to architecture, though, but it's cool that you know that, and I think it makes it more interesting, but, yeah, I mean, the reflections make it, and if you look real close on that one in the middle, you can even see little specks of cloud in there as
Mhm.
well, so, yeah, I think this one's all about the reflections for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm thinking you probably took this with just the one times, like the main camera, Dave?
Give me a second. I wanna say yes, but let me double check real quick here.
Because I think it's showing, detail very well.
Mhm.
It just doesn't look like an ultra wide shot to me, but it
Yeah,
just
Fusion
gives you
camera. It was a Fusion
yeah,
camera. Yeah.
yeah. So it gives you a really good sense of how high these buildings are. I mean, typically a floor in a building is what 10 to 12 feet type of thing.
Mhm.
So there's pretty good detail even in the reflection. There's some pretty good
Yep.
detail. It's a little warped here and there or whatever, but it's glass, right? Um,
Exactly,
but
exactly.
but
So,
you got the trees in the bottom right hand corner that kind of give you a sense that you know the start of the image is pretty high to begin with. Um, but yeah, it's just a great architectural shot. I took one like this in Toronto one time, just to really show how big these buildings
mhm.
are. So, what I like too is on that one on the right, where it kind of goes up into the second section. It's on pillars,
Mhm.
but you can see some lights underneath there, and you can almost see a little bit of the detail of the underside of that thing. So the camera was able to capture some exposure latitude very well, especially with the bright sky in the background.
Yeah.
And I do like the way it's a wispy clouds, and you could tell that it's you know without knowing what time of day it was. We know it was early morning, but you could almost think that it would be in the evening too, because it still has some warm light to it. So
Yeah.
um, just well captured is all I could say.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
And Dwight,
Yeah, so this is an example of using manual focus for me. Yeah, this was taken with the Moment telephoto lens, the latest series, and I wanted the flowers to be in focus, specifically the one on the left there that's open, and I was using the focus peaking, and I made sure that that was really lit up. I had green on, so that flower is really lit up in green, and everything kind of fell off from that. Excuse me. And this was shot in RAW, and my whole goal on this one was just to maintain the softness of the image and enjoy the fact that it's not being overprocessed by Apple. And it's just a soft image. Excuse me, just a second. Yeah, I just wanted to be kind of soft, like the flower, and um, the architecture in the background, just kind of as a fall off. But yeah, that's there's not much to this other than maintaining the softness and utilizing the manual focus, I think, in the third party app, which was Reflex, by the way.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's it shows some nice texture on the petals of the flower and that. And I've over this weekend I put together a presentation for our local camera club on flower photography. So some of the things that that I could say about this will be actually in my presentation of all things. But the focus I think is in the right place. The focus fall off to the back. It's irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. The details of the building in the back are irrelevant because that brings more focus back onto the flower, which is the main subject of of the frame. So, yeah, very well captured.
And I got a little bokeh in the upper left hand corner there. Which I always like. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, Dwight, it's not as Apple can do, the artificially detailed and almost grainy, and not the good type of grain that it can do for macro, where it puts so much detail and tries to do so much outline that it really distracts from it. It just has this natural look with the flower in there.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I like the fact that the flowers, as you were saying about when you were showing the different zooms earlier, you have the pink of the flowers, then behind that you have the green, and behind that you have the building and the sky. So you don't have different colors on different layers. So the colors, not only does the focus break up the image, but the colors also break up the image.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that establishes my foreground, midground, and background. Yep.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Dave. Different elements for different layers. So, yeah, another good one.
Thank you.
So this is my first one. So we have it's called a tricolor willow. So it's not like a tree, but it's just like a big bush. And when it's in full bloom, which it's not yet, but when it's in full bloom, it has these salmon-colored blossoms on it, and I can't wait to get out and capture some of those. But it was a nice day, believe it or not. We had a nice day recently. Today was nice too, but so the weather was nice. I was out without a jacket on, and I thought, I'm gonna see what's going on with this bush. And I had my 240 millimeter lens with the 300 millimeter macro thing on it, and I'm just kind of walking around this thing, and what is going on? If I seen these bees, so there was 3 different kinds of bees, I guess. One was a wasp, and then there was these 2 other kinds of bees. So the big bee is the common eastern bumblebee, and the little bee that's approaching it is the western honeybee. And I know that because when I opened them in my Photos app, it told me. Otherwise, I would just call it a bee and a bumblebee. But anyway, so the bumblebee was hanging on this one little, I think what'll end up being a blossom here, and it was using its legs to clean itself off, like just to I didn't really see any pollen on it, but it was just wiping itself down with its legs, and I thought that was kind of cool. And I didn't realize I had this other bee in the frame. And when I did, the first thing that came to my mind is the little bee saying, "What are you doing?" And the big bee says, "Huh?" And the little bee says, "What are you doing?" And the big bee says, "Huh, well, nothing, just hanging around." Or whatever that meme is with that Beetlejuice guy. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of cool that he was hanging on with his front legs and grooming himself with his other 4 legs, and it was pretty cool. And then the other bee the little bee just kind of heading in that way. And I don't know if he was going for that little blossom or what he was, but as soon as I took it, I thought, of course I was chimping. I was looking to make sure I had the focus right. And then by that time they were both moving on to another branch somewhere. So, but yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. And I did the edit in Luminar Neo on the desktop, which I'm doing a lot more of now. So I can see better for one, because it's a bigger screen. And I was able to make sure the sharpness was where it was and all that stuff. And I just did my usual edits. And one thing I do a lot of recently is use the Mystic feature in Luminar Neo. It gives it kind of almost like an Orton effect, but not as much. You can adjust the strength of it and all that stuff. So I really like how that plays on an image.
Yeah, and it almost, and I like the fact that the smaller bee is out of focus.
Yeah,
You can, so it gives you that extra depth going on, and it's almost like, okay, you've had enough, my turn.
Yeah, I think that's what was going on, really.
But
yeah, I can kind of see how you. And I've done the bee photos too. It's challenging, right? Because you're looking for your focus peaking marks on these things, and they move quickly. But this one tells a story. It's like, hey, hey, big guy, I'm trying to get in there and do the same thing you are. But yeah, the clarity in the fur, I guess. I mean, that's really cool. The focus around that aspect of it, and the face, and into the flower that he or she is working on is is great, and I like that fall off into the rest of the plant. The smudgy green, if you will. It adds a interesting background. But yeah, I think if I saw that thing land on my shoulder, it'd be that'd be about the size of a bat to me. So I'm not sure I'd dig that too much.
Well, to put it into perspective of the size of the bumblebee, the big one, it would be probably almost an inch long.
That's too big. That's too big to land on my shoulder.
You would never survive in Australia.
No, probably not.
Yeah. So, and I should say too that this is just slightly cropped, a little bit off the bottom, and off maybe a little bit off both sides. But I think I made it actually like the 4:5 aspect ratio. So, but yeah, it's always fun shooting these things.
Did you upscale it at all?
You know what? I had two versions. I believe this one could be the upscaled version.
Yeah, because sometimes that can really bring out detail because you can crop in more.
Yeah. And I did the upscale I think I did it right in Luminar Neo. Looking at it zoomed like say this big on my screen, it wouldn't really look much different. But
no, I don't think
once you started pixel peeping, then you'd see it. But yeah, so that's my my first one. So Dave, this was a pretty cool.
This is on for the half marathon. It's 13.1 miles total, and this is right around a mile 11.5. So this is where you start to, most people do training, but they don't train you don't do 13-mile runs a lot of times. You do 8, 9, 10 miles. So if you're going to start having a drop off, if for the half, this is where you start having it. This is also the longest uphill climb of the entire course. And this is kind of the beginning of the bridge, which is the uphill climb. So by this point, you kind of hit to a turn to get onto the bridge. And a lot of people just start walking because it is, I think the bridge is around a half mile long and it's all uphill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's all uphill. So, most bridges, if you go over, you go up you go up to the middle, and you come down, or you go up so far and you come down. This one just goes straight all the way up, and yeah, so it just kind of gets you right there, and the fact that the way that I like, and I did this in Picasso. And it did the border on it, and it kept her out of it. So she's kind of not in the image, but kind of walking into the image. And you can tell that she's not running right now. Her head's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
down, she's kind of like, okay, I'm getting myself ready for this long uphill. And it's a great view because this is a view of Pittsburgh you don't see a lot from this angle. There's other views which are iconic views of the city that's more touristy. Everyone takes a picture, not necessarily from this going from the south side up to what's considered uptown, which is it's getting better, but not the best part of the city. But you have a nice spattering of the different skyscrapers in the background. But I also like the fact that there is a little, I don't know if that's graffiti or if that is something written by the Public Works on the metal
Oh,
part
yeah.
of the bridge.
Mhm.
And you still have the power lines kind of there I didn't get rid of. So it shows like, yeah, you're still in a city
Mhm.
Yeah,
with all the infrastructure.
that looks like, something that the city did.
Yeah.
Triangle being upside down triangle
Yeah.
being a point of reference of some type. Um, did you superimpose the gal walking
No,
on that, or is that part of the
no,
okay.
that's part of the original photo.
Now did you mask around her shoulder, or did
That
it come out
was
that way?
that just came out that way with Picasso.
Okay.
With Picasso, you can select kind of different presets,
Yeah.
and one of the presets has the border on it, and it will if there's an image that's near the edge of the like an object that's easily you could see this is an object, it'll put the border behind it and leave it kind of hanging outside.
Sure.
And honestly, I like that effect.
Yeah.
I really like that
Mhm.
effect, and it did all that automatically.
Mhm.
There was no touch up needed or, me having to, it took too much. It did all that border work by itself.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
so
cool.
now that you kind of explained where this is and where she is, you can kind of tell she's probably looking down and not looking forward to this hill, maybe. But yeah, interesting and fun. Picasso's a fun one.
Hmm.
Um, it looks like an iconic building in Pittsburgh. So you must be in the background. That must be downtown, correct?
Right, right. That's
Okay.
downtown
Yeah.
looking that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Fun.
I like the textured look too. It
Mhm.
looks like it's on a canvas.
Well, that's something else it does because inside of Picasso, it can simulate different papers and
Oh,
give you
okay.
that texture. So honestly, that's kind of why I like the app because it's not just, it makes it look like a painting, but it
Yeah.
says, oh, well, this is a watercolor, or you can do oil. And, now you can select, the different types of paper to give you that automatic um, texture, not only on the image, but in the border itself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm glad you left the power lines in and all that stuff, like it keeps it authentic and it just really it looks like it's been painted with a paintbrush. So that's cool.
and like you guys were saying about, I'm sorry, with the pictures about having the different layers to it. So you have her in the front, you have the kind of
Oh,
bridge
yeah.
and the power lines and the
Yep.
city in the background.
It shows
I think that's
depth.
what really makes it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really makes it work well. So Dwight, your second one?
Yeah, I think there's some beauty in decay, right? This is a flower that's probably headed for the dirt here pretty soon, but I think, this is another example of using manual focus, and the way I did this was I I believe I had the, moment long range macro on for this one. But I just I used my focus peaking and kinda came in and out on it, and when it grabbed as much of that flower as I could, I took the shot. I edited it in Photoshop, and there's some natural light kinda coming in from the upper left. You can see reflected on the branch there, I think, if you will. And then
Mhm.
I brought it over to Adobe Camera Raw or, Lightroom equivalent of Photoshop and then added just a little bit of texture where the veins are in the leaves, just to kind of bring those out a little bit. And again, we have kind of a foreground in focus. It falls off into the background, which is more bushes kind of in the background. Just simple, but fun macro photography here.
And I do love the fact that you do have the yellow and the reddish browns there, and the veins of the individual leaves really showing up. Like, especially on the white ones where the veins are, you can see that that kind of gives the extra feel of, again, the flower's done, because those veins are so dark compared to the white part there.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like it might have been. No, it wouldn't have been an iris flower because it's on a really large type of branch by the looks of it. So yeah, I don't know. Your phone's going to say, "What do you think it is? It's dead."
It is an iris.
But is it really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, interesting.
But I think it's more interesting that you knew that. Good job, Greg.
Well, I'm actually shocked that I was correct on that because the only reason I thought it would be an iris is because they look fairly delicate, like the iris petals are. But then when I saw the size of the branch that they're on, I thought, no, they can't be an iris because I didn't think that they would be on that big of a branch. But
this is a really big plant, and this one we've got big honeybees out. I don't know if they're honeybees or big bees, but they were all over this thing, and I couldn't get them. They were the big ones, the helicopter ones, and all the other ones had the western honeybees flying around. But yeah, I'll try to get some bees on this thing one time.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a simple shot. For me, it was more about how the colors work together and kind of complementing each other, and not much else.
Well, I like the soft diffuse light that you had to work with. It looks like it was a cloudy day, and had it been full sun, I don't think it would have made for as good of a photo because you would have had some harsh shadows and maybe blown out highlights or something. But I think it really shows well in the lighting that was available there, and like you say, there is beauty in decay. The first, you can't help but think of, okay, what did this look like when it was in its prime? And I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got photos of the ones that are doing a little bit better, but
yeah,
I think I do. But I was just kind of drawn to that one.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, it's one of the things I love about macro. I mean, you may have just walked by this, right? But you had your macro lens, and something probably caught your eye about this, and you started shooting it, and sure enough, you got a shot. But like I say, otherwise you probably just would have went right on by if you weren't, if you didn't have that macro mindset.
I'm not walking by too many things right now, which is very annoying to a lot of people. So
yeah, yeah. My wife's getting pretty patient with me because she knows darn well that if there's flowers around, I'm probably stopping.
Yeah.
but she'll just carry on and I'll catch up, that sort of thing. But all right. So here's my second one. The sky was just on fire last night. Now, admittedly, this is an edit and it's going to be a little more emphasized than what it probably was in real life, true to the eye, but it was pretty cool. I was looking at the sky about an hour before sunset from home, and I thought, because I went the night before, and I got, it was clear. There was a very small amount of clouds on the horizon and nothing above it, so it was a very disappointing sunset. And when I looked at the sky last night and saw what was developing, I kind of had it in my mind that this could be good. So I texted a friend of mine who lives out in a little wee village about 5 miles north of where I live here, on the bay. And I asked him, "Are you going to be doing the sunset tonight?" And about 10 minutes later, he said, "Heading out there now." I said, "I'll be there in 20." And when I got there, he had his GoPro set up to do a time lapse, and it turned out pretty cool. And then he was just taking, the odd shot with his phone. So, I set mine up on the tripod and I just started shooting away, and we're talking away about stuff. And I mean, this guy's brilliant. He's actually created his own AI, just on a very small tangent. The AI that he set up it works on his computer. It doesn't even go online. It just works in his computer, and he can talk to this AI thing that he's got, and it could find anything that he does coding and all this stuff, and it'll find little snippets of code that he was working on a project 3 months ago and bring it to his attention. Like, it's pretty crazy. But anyway, so that's the kind of conversation we were having. We were really geeking out on this stuff. But so the sunset. So that image I showed earlier when I was talking about the zebra stripes, that was the same place, same time. The sun was just hitting the horizon. Now, this was after the sun went below the horizon, and I believe it was a 20-second shot with re-expose, and I think I just used the 5 times camera. I might have used I used the main camera with the 2 times telephoto from Reflex. And, I just the way those clouds were sweeping in, basically the center of the frame there, it was just really interesting. Like, he took a panel looking back behind us, where what you see on my picture was the right end of it. So those clouds kind of made a line across the sky. I didn't get that, but no, I was just really loved the way these clouds were, glowing in orange, and then there was still a bit of blue sky up above there in the top right, where through the clouds. And the only thing I did really to manipulate this image was his GoPro was set up on a tripod in the lower right corner. So I took it into touch retouch and took it out of there, because I tried the generative erase in Luminar Neo, and it just didn't do a very good job.
It's not very good.
I was kind of disappointed in it. So when I got the edit completely finished, then I just took it over to the touch retouch, and it does an amazing job on it. You can't even tell where it was, but yeah. So it was just a really nice evening. Bugs everywhere. Like, you've seen Shane Moston going, like, waving his hands around trying to get rid of the bugs. That's nothing compared to what the bugs were like out there last night. But luckily, by the time I left, it was getting darker and they were gone. I don't know. I guess they went to bed. But no, I just really liked the way the clouds were lit up, and I did some adjustments with Luminar Neo where I really warmed up the sky, and not a whole lot, mind you, but and again, when I took this, I didn't have the white balance set to where I wanted to, or where I should have, so it was a little cooler looking. But taking that white balance slider up really helped in post. But this is one of my favorite shots of the year I've taken so far. That's for sure.
Yeah, this is really striking, and the colored gold you have in the sky, that is so unusual for a sunset. It's almost like a dark honey. It's not, I wouldn't call it yellow. It's gold. It's definitely gold, not yellow, but it's almost a honey gold almost. And just
and
the
it
fact
was
that,
similar. Like, it was similar to that, believe it or not.
and the fact that the whole sky was that gold. It wasn't like a bit of the sky was the gold and the rest of it, like, sometimes you get that I like the gradation sometimes where, right at the sunset's one color and you're going to either black or blue going up, but the entire sky just being that color with the texture of the clouds and everything is just wow. And the reflection on the water too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It was
striking, Greg. The the key with sunset photos obviously is timing, and you were here at the right time. I'm not sure what it would look like, 10 minutes before or 10 minutes after. I don't know if you would get some of the, traditional pinks and stuff like that after the sun went down. But yeah, this is a beautiful sunset, and I like the softness from the long exposure as well, and kind of the leading lines of the brightness kind of bringing you down into the horizon back there, and some of the deflection of the foreground light and stuff like that. So yeah, good job. It's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I have probably 30 pictures that I took last night, and I've only processed 3 of them.
Mhm.
I got to go through some of them and see if there's any that are any more that are worth doing, or are they just going to be very similar to this? So
Yeah.
but I hadn't played with re-expose for quite some time, and it was fun to get that one back out.
Yeah. Very nice.
And yeah, thanks. I was able to get those detail out of those rocks in the foreground.
Mhm.
Had I shot it, in anything but raw, I don't know. I might not have been able to get them back out of it. But no, it was a great experience, because I was there probably for about a good hour, and Will, the friend I was with, he lives right there. Like, he's like a 2-minute walk to his house, and so it was kind of cool to be able to see, like, his GoPro was still sitting out there, and he took his phone out, connected to it, shut it off, and we stood there and watched the time lapse. It was probably 20 or 30 seconds, and I think I shared it on my regular Facebook feed today. But it was really cool. It was just such a cool thing to watch the clouds as they rolled in, and he pretty well predicted that band of cloud that you see coming in on the angle there would just kind of roll in. Like, it was pretty cool. So,
Nice. Nice.
yeah. So that is our recent photos. I think we had a pretty good discussion on taking control of your camera, and it's my hope that if you've watched this or listened to it, give things a try, and let us know what you think. If you have any questions about this manual stuff, like, I know part of the thing that part of the reason why I wanted to do this one was last week a lovely lady from the UK, Karen O'Hara, posed a question about, she's using reflex, and when she tried to do a manual exposure, she would set the shutter speed at any value over 600, and then when she went to change the ISO, the shutter speed, went back and adjusted according to the ISO. If you did that below 600, it wouldn't do that. It was kind of a weird thing. So I tried to replicate it on my phone and had the same issue. I don't know if that's a limitation of the camera API or what. In fact, no, I don't think it is. It's got to be a reflex thing, because I tried it in Pro Camera, and Pro Camera held the shutter speed to where it would be set. But anyway, but that's part of why, what got it into my head to do an episode about taking manual control, because I knew that there would be so much to talk about with this. And like I said earlier, we can do a separate episode on manual exposure. We could do a separate episode on, manual focus, and and the different features of the Apple camera and things like that. So I think it's a a good thing for people to try to, you know, take control of your camera. And, you know, there's, you know, not every situation is going to require it, but there's going to be some situations where manual control will definitely make for a better image, especially when the lighting is difficult or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. Well, thanks guys for this wonderfully engaged conversation. And thanks to anybody that joined us in the chat. I see Gary Green's there, Maurice Backley, Todd Weiner, and Will Newcomb, late getting to the show, but he's there. And
he just woke up.
Yeah. So I mean, talk about different time zones. Like, wow. But this is an oddball time that we're doing this, so Dwight can go to the dinner thing. But you know, luckily we were able to accommodate that. And on the next show, we will be back at our regular time at 7 p.m. Eastern, 2 weeks from tonight. And we look forward to having people join us then. And one thing we don't know is what the heck we're going to talk about.
We'll figure it out.
Figure something out. Yep.
Maybe we can do a live edit or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget, we are creeping closer to WWDC.
Yes, that's right.
Early June.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, maybe we can. It's not my favorite thing to do because sometimes they never turn out to be true, but maybe we can talk a little bit about what we're expecting to see in iOS 19 and possibly, you know, the iPhone's coming up in the fall, but we'll see we'll see what comes to our minds, and if we have something a little more interesting, we'll definitely do that. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and I guess we'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you.
Have a great
Have a good one.
Everyone.